our last sector workshop. We will have one more workshop following on the heels of this one, which will cover the cross-cutting strategies. Today, this is our 5th workshop in this series, and we are excited to have a jam-packed session and have a great panel with us today. The meeting goals for today are to develop a shared understanding of our land use and natural and working lands, vote to select the top climate mitigation strategies that benefit communities, and then begin to ideate implementation examples. And for those of you who are joining this as their first meeting, we'll walk you through how this is going to happen. So our meeting agenda, we have a first hour meeting where we are talking to you, and then the second meeting is devoted to our community task force that is supporting this project. We'll start with introductions so you can learn about us, the project, and then we'll learn about you. Then we will be voting on land use, voting and getting an overview over land use and working lands. And then we have a panel discussion. We'll vote again and take a deep dive into some of the strategies that people selected, and then talk about next steps. So it's jam-filled, or it's filled with a lot of elements. And then Alice, are you going to cover this, or you want me to cover that?
Yeah, it's all good. So this series is brought to you by the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant that the City of Albuquerque received on behalf of the Fork County region. So it will all be culminating into a comprehensive climate action plan that's due December 1st, 2025. And we'll give you a little bit more information on that in the next few slides. Next slide. Next slide. So this grant has been received by the Office of Sustainability at the City of Albuquerque. We were established back in 2019 by Mayor Keller, and in the early years, we really worked hard to develop some foundational documents, which include the greenhouse gas inventory and our current climate action plan. And we're really seeing this grant as an opportunity to, yes, develop a regional climate action plan that helps ensure that we're all moving towards similar goals in the region, but also as an ability for the city to update the city's climate action plan as well. And we're doing this in such a way that we really hope that this effort and this engagement will also inspire other major entities within central New Mexico to use this data to update theirs. So for example, we're hoping that the Bernalillo County will update or create their first climate action plan, and any other local governments or major institutions that want to use this data, we can share it with them. Our hope is, fingers crossed, that we can also develop some kind of dashboard for coordinated local action, but ultimately our focus now is on this regional comprehensive climate action plan. Next slide. So like I said, it's facilitated by the Sustainability Office. Ann Simon is our fearless leader. We're also supported really heavily by our staff. Today you'll be hearing from Veronica, and I've been hired to oversee this program. We also have Lotus, who's our technical experts up in Denver, and then Planned here on the ground is helping us with our engagement. Next slide. We are joined today by some amazing people. We've got a really talented community task force. This is the list on the left. They're going to be really highlighted in the second hour. You're welcome to listen in on that part of the meeting. In the first hour, we have a really great lineup of panelists to also help us develop that shared understanding and help us before we go into our final vote. Next slide. Okay, Katrina, take it away.
Thank you, Alice. All right. First, we want to learn a little more about you before we jump into this. So we will be relying heavily on the Poll Everywhere to get everybody's input and co-create strategies or implementation ideas around the strategies. So if you can all get yourself situated, it's best to use your browser so you can type in forcefully answers to this. You can also scan the QR code and do this on your phone. So here again, big QR code. The Pull Everywhere link is also in the chat. So we'll get started in a second. You can also type or do old school texting to the number 22333. But again, we recommend to do the web browser. That's easiest. All right, we'll get started with the first question. This is one of my favorite questions, and I might write a research paper on this at some point. Red, green, or Christmas, or I don't like chili. We don't judge. Maybe a little bit. Whoa, lots of Christmas people here in the room today. That's interesting. This is just to get you started on this. You can basically select your answer. You can correct your answer if you like to. Once you enter it, it will be recorded. And you will see with some of the next questions that even if it doesn't show up on the screen, there's usually a slow scroll. It will still be recorded. All right, I'll hop on to the next one. Christmas is the winner this time. All right, what's your zip code? And here, please put any zip code you associate with. So submit one for where you live and one for where you work. This will help us to identify who we are connecting with and potentially also to relate the strategies back on a more localized level. So yeah, zip code for where you live and where you work. All right, we'll let this jam a little longer. Looks like where I am located in downtown Albuquerque, 7102 is pretty well represented, but we have a good distribution here today. All right, I'll jump to the next slide. Next question for you all. And if you joined late, the link to this is in the chat, so you can just click on that and participate on the browser, or you use the QR code here on your phone. All right, we'll go to the next question. Okay, what groups do you associate with? Communities or groups do you associate with? And this can be a neighborhood, your city, or any social groups you associate with, any advocacy you're doing, anything you connect with would be great to have here. And again, it's good for us to understand what areas, which groups we are connecting with, we are reaching, and then to see whether there's any gaps we need to fill. So great, North Valley, Climbers, New Mexico Solar Energy Association, Arid LID, awesome. Las Lunas. All right, we'll let this a little longer. Again, this is the slow scroll of our screen. If you submit something, it's gonna be in there, even if it doesn't show up. So great. Food systems. I'll let this up for another few seconds. Parents. Bikes. Awesome. All right, we'll move on to our next slide. This one is the last of our practice poll questions. We'll have more questions later on, so get yourself situated. Again, the link is in the chat if you haven't yet. We would really appreciate everybody participating just because we want to hear from everyone, and this is an opportunity, or gives us an opportunity, to have everybody's feedback recorded. This question, how would you describe yourself? So are you representing a community? Are you a policy advisor or a subject matter expert or a task force member or other? And that again helps us to better understand who is in the room today. So thank you so much for participating to this point. I'm going to hand it over to Veronica.
I think I'll take this one.
Or
if that's
Alice.
okay. Yes, all good.
No, that sounds perfect.
Cool.
It looks like some people already chimed in.
Yeah. So this is our practice vote. So we will be doing an official vote later on in the meeting, but this gives you an idea of the kinds of strategies that other planning efforts like ours typically include in their efforts. And our goal today is really to identify what are kind of the top strategies we should be focusing in on. based on their ability to reduce emissions, but also benefit communities here in New Mexico. So we'll basically be taking the results of today's vote to then flesh out what those specific strategies will be. So here's a great opportunity to understand what's going on or what we're going to be voting on, but also to understand that you can stack your votes. So if you really feel strongly about one of the strategies, you can put multiple votes in one bucket, or if you want to spread them all out, that's also reasonable. So we'll close this now because we'll have another opportunity to suss it out later on. So let's go to the next slide. Oh, I think you might be on mute still.
Oh, I meant to ask whether Dan got the priorities before we move on. Okay,
Yep,
perfect.
I got them. Thanks.
Sorry, Alice. All right.
All great.
Next slide, if it will.
Great, and we're going to pass it over to Veronica to give a 3-minute overview of natural and working lands. So it's a tough job, but I wish her luck, everybody.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Veronica Blunt. I am the newest sustainability specialist with the City Sustainability Office. As stated, I will be giving a 3-minute overview of these sectors. Then I will ask you to share what you heard and what you agree with and maybe what's missing. This is a good time to take notes so you can easily copy and paste them into the polling platform later. Your comments within the polling platform and question later will help shape our chapter summaries by highlighting factors that resonate with you and make sure that we all go into that final vote with all of your wonderful insights and context. Okay, let's get into it. The natural working land sector includes forests, woodlands, grasslands, shrublands, croplands, rangelands, and urban green spaces. Natural working lands play a key role in the global carbon cycle, contributing to both greenhouse gas emissions as well as greenhouse gas reductions and removals. When our office thinks about natural working lands, we think about the long historical context of farming and land use practices. Indigenous people have been caring for these lands for generations. New Mexico's landscape speaks to the rich and layered history, including Spanish commons, the preservation of agricultural lands and open space, and the continuation of preservation over restoration. New Mexico is a land that we love, thanks to a large part to open space that supports water filtration and storage, preserves farmland as a way of life to feed our local communities, provides habitat and migratory corridors for wildlife, and even mitigates air pollution and sequesters carbon. Although it's not easy work, our region has a wide variety of strengths when it comes to natural working lands, from protecting the Rio Grande River to the vast amounts of public lands to a rich agricultural economy. And our office hopes to foster the inherent good practice of partnerships and innovative solutions to support natural working land enterprises with this work. As with natural working lands, we think about land use. When we recognize indigenous land use practice, especially in the understanding of historical patterns. Understanding historical patterns of subsistence and land use is necessary for addressing complex issues. All around the world, cities are growing and expanding in size. There is a set amount of land that can be used to conserve or develop. Considerations need to be made for increased urbanization, the North American sprawl, our dependence on solo driving, housing and transportation index, and the influence of zoning codes and the urban heat and island effect. Central New Mexico has a variety of strengths, often born from recognition of addressing gaps in the community needs and from appreciation of existing resources and practices. Just to name a few of these, our strengths: transit-oriented development and urban infill within the Albuquerque downtown areas, the IDO, or AKA the Integrated Development Ordinance, green stormwater infrastructure, urban tree planting, investment in parks and open space within the city, accessory dwelling units, also known as casitas, and trail connections up and down the Rio Grande River. All of these systems are interconnected and have intersections with all other sectors in this series. When our office thinks about land use and natural working lands in the context of equitable climate action, we acknowledge that regulations and solutions often come after causing harm. Populations with the highest social and financial burdens are most likely to live and work in around these spaces, thus experiencing more harm. And we want to center the importance of access to quality resources without unjust barriers or. Thank you.
Good job, Veronica. Not easy to do. So this is the section of the meeting where you get to reflect back what it is that you heard that you agree with. And this really helps us to understand what are some of the things that we should be kind of amplifying in our framing of this sector. This can be reflected in the narrative, for example, in our chapter summary. It also gives us a sense of what kinds of things and values we should be prioritizing and preserving as we think about our climate actions. So we see the importance of less sprawl and I'm assuming reducing single-use zoning, urban forestry and tree planting initiatives, indigenous ways of knowing and ecological knowledge. Great. Everyone loves trees. Increase and manage existing tree canopy. Everything sounded good. That's nice to hear. More green stormwater infrastructure. And again, as Katrina mentioned before, this is a scrolling response. So you can, that was a prepared response, nice. But we can also, we'll be able to share out all of our polling responses later as well. So you'll be able to see all these responses in our newsletter summary in a few weeks. So with that, we are going to move on. So if you have pressed enter, your responses have been collected. But we want to make sure that we have time for our next question, which is personally one of my favorites, is what did you not hear? What did we not cover that you think is important for us to take into this space as we start thinking about regional climate planning and what major institutions should really be focusing in on? So we have investing in young farmers. Yeah, we have a really great local agricultural system here in New Mexico. Additional zoning codes for older neighborhoods. Also some like cultural preservation there. That's great. Increased thermal biomass conversion. I'm assuming that's probably around trees and turning them into biomass fuels. A balance of housing and jobs. Moving away from animal agriculture. Yep. And maybe other like resource intensive crops, perhaps. Water conservation, keeping water in communities. Yes, that's very important for New Mexico. Great. Educating the general public, dangers of relying on carbon markets. Yep. Shift to permeable asphalt. Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Safe bike lanes, especially in the international district. Yep, absolutely. Recycling wood from urban trees. Wonderful. Okay, we're going to give you just a few more seconds here. But these are just some of the ideas that we really want to develop together to really take into our shared understanding of what's going on with land use and zoning in your guys' own words. So I also see workforce development, native green space and development, increased permeable services. Wonderful. All right, team, I think it's time to move on to the next slide. So this is where we're going to share just a few more big picture best practices that our office has looked into in preparation for this meeting. So next slide. So we looked to a few different industry experts when it comes to city climate planning. Project Drawdown, Rocky Mountain Institute are two that we particularly like. But these two entities, when they talk about land use and agriculture, they're really looking at they also touch on things like reduction in our consumption, which I think is a really interesting component to this, but also how we design the urban environment and how it influences that and a variety of other sectors. So there's a huge intersectionality with these particular sectors, but also how, as a regional plan and as a group, we can really think about how do these multiple agencies collaborate across boundaries. So that's part of where some of our issues run into play, is that they might not be as well connected or streamlined as we could. And so within a regional context or regional plan, we might have the opportunity to address some of those. Next slide. So some of the feedback we've received so far has mentioned that some of our strategies aren't as rural focused, and we thought it was especially important to highlight some examples from other places that have more of that rural context. So this is an example of just that. So the Colorado Department of Local Affairs put together this resource of a variety of land use opportunities for their rural communities. So as you can see, they kind of typically talk about density bonus programs to increase compact development. There's a lot of affordable housing initiatives, or at least an interest in supporting those, housing diversity, growth management, mobility items as well. The link to is included in these slides, which we'll send out to everyone later. But I think it's important to highlight that these kinds of strategies can be seen in both the rural and the urban environment in this context, and there are resources available. Next slide. And this is a short list of strategies that our other consultants put together. And so this is from an early stage of this grant program that we received. So across the country, there's a bunch of regional climate plans that were created and that were called the Priority Climate Action Plan. So on the far right of this table, you'll see the PCAP. So this is basically indicating the frequency that these kinds of strategies or these strategy buckets were included in these regional plans like ours. So you can see that expanding urban forests and or green spaces was really high up on that list, but it also included adopting soil and land management practices to sequester carbon, as well as building dense communities, transit-oriented development, and then reducing agricultural fuel emissions was kind of low on the list. Same with improving livestock management. But that kind of gives you an idea of what other regional government or regional plans are thinking of, and roughly kind of a ballpark guess of what the greenhouse gas emissions reductions would be, and also maybe the cost to government. Next slide. And this, we thought it is important to highlight this data one more time. We do have a full webinar that does a deep dive into our climate pollution inventory, but this we wanted to highlight because agriculture and trees and forests play a really interesting role in land use. So you can see on the far right-hand side of this graph, where it's circled on the left, that is the amount of emissions reduction, so carbon sinks that we see in the region due to our forests and our land management practices. And it's really cool to see that Torrance County has an outsized emissions sink in that sector, which is very cool. But we also have agricultural emissions as well. And those typically come from the fertilizers that we use, as well as the kinds of farm equipment that are utilized in those industries. So just good data to have going forward. Next slide. Thank you. And last but not least, that we have projected this to not change in the future without any additional policy actions. But the trick here is that land use also heavily influences housing and transportation, which are those two big buckets at the bottom. So it's really worthwhile understanding that while our agricultural, forestry, and land use emissions look small, they are directly related to transportation and buildings. So keep that in mind as we go on to the next slide. So here is one of my favorite parts, which is our panel response. So we'll go to the next slide. and we're going to just go in alphabetical order. So we would really love to welcome Amy, our first Amy Bell, to share your 2-minute response of what's some advice that you'd like to give the group before we go into our final vote on our top strategies in these sectors.
Thanks, Alice. Hello, everybody. I'm Amy Bell. I'm a landscape architect with Anthropopulous Design and Planning. And I think what I've been thinking about as, sort of reviewing this presentation ahead of time, hearing what folks responded, to the poll everywhere, is kind of a theme that we're hearing on a lot of projects right now, particularly in rural communities, but really everywhere, is this idea of really designing and planning to management capacity, because a lot of our communities don't really have a whole lot of that management capacity. And so really thinking realistically about, if we are going to be planting a bunch of trees, who is going to be caring for those trees and what are the standard management practices for that. And I think a couple important things related to that is just the practice of first understanding what we have. So inventory, whether that's a tree inventory or an asset inventory, understanding, how we are currently managing those assets, and, are there ways to shift those management practices so that they are a better use of our resources. Great example would be, we're doing tree inventory and grants, and if they, just did a bark mulch ring around their trees in their parks, they wouldn't have as much mechanical damage to their trees, and their trees would be healthier, and we wouldn't have to plant more because the ones that are already there would be doing well. I think also just sort of designing for like a lighter touch. So, using methods like green stormwater infrastructure, self-sustaining systems, habitat restoration. But the thing that kind of comes along with that always is the necessary education and interpretation for folks to understand that messy landscapes may be healthier landscapes. And I think that's all I had. Did I stay within 2 minutes?
You're doing great. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Amy. All right, on to our second Amy Larson.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. My name is Amy Larson. I work with the Quivira Coalition, and we are an educational nonprofit that works with farmers and ranchers to provide a lot of different support, whether it's apprenticeship, mentorship, technical support, doing things like workshops and education. And our mission is to help farmers and ranchers, support not only a healthy financially speaking operation, but also one that really explores how we can make and be a part of creating more resilient landscapes within the working ranch, working farm context. So what I've been with Quivira for now about 3 years, and in working with farmers and ranchers, both across the state, but also in Colorado, Arizona, and Texas. In these dryland contexts, what I really hear is kind of 3 things. One is, how do we keep water on the land, and how do we keep our soils protected so that we have less bare ground, and as folks in the room might know, that bare ground is really susceptible to erosion and shedding water off of the landscape. And without the water, then it makes growing either grass, trees, whatever kind of vegetation you want to see on the landscape that much more difficult. So the things that I hear folks are really concerned and interested in are sort of what are strategies to mitigate that bare ground, improving the vegetation, not only density, but diversity, which will help, keep erosion from increasing. And then also how do we create healthier grasslands, healthier forests? What are strategies that we can use within the context of working with livestock? So that might include learning how to really help move animals through the landscape in a way that helps the vegetation sort of recover and rebound. So giving appropriate amount of rest to that landscape without damaging and overgrazing, for example. So some strategies related to erosion control when we start seeing, gullies that are shedding water off of ranches, there are certain strategies that will help slow that water down, help heal those the land and help kind of fill in those gullies and start to make the water infiltrate more slowly. I'm not
Thank
sure
you
where
so
I'm
much,
at in the 2
Amy.
minutes.
I think you're doing great. I think we
Cool.
will move on to our next
Thank you.
person. Thank you so much, Amy. Andrew, take it away.
Thank you very much. I guess I finish up the A team of this group. Anyway, I have two things really to throw in here. The first is really agreeing with Amy Bell on management strategies in regards to landscapes that are existing and new ones being planted. First off, I'm Andrew Lisignoli, and I'm representing Trees of Corrales and pretty much supplying plant material that I want to say hopefully is appropriate to go into a changing climate, which is the second point I have to make. And that is, we are entering into much harder and drier conditions and supplying plant material that's going to survive that and thrive that and be here for generations to come is a bit of a challenge, because currently a lot of those plants are not in demand. As a result, they're not available in the market. There needs to be a little bit more discussion and understanding between the folks that are requesting more appropriate plant material and the growers, so that there can be an adequate supply to meet that demand. Because the demand is the correct demand, but the supply is lacking. And that disconnect needs to be repaired. And I've got some thoughts on that to be shared later. But back to Amy's point on management tools, it always disheartens all of us when we see new plantings go in or existing plantings, and there's no money, proper money, that has gone into maintaining that plant material and educating the folks that are out there trying to maintain it in that proper management practices. Those are my 2 points at this point, and I think I finished in 2 minutes. So thank you very much.
You did great. Thank you so much, Andrew. Off to Bonnie.
Hey everyone, my name is Bonnie Strange. I'm the senior planner for City of Albuquerque Urban Forestry. I'm glad to see a lot coming up about our urban canopy. Gives me a lot to do for sure. And I wrote down a few bullet points here just to keep myself on track. But I think that many of us are aware in these kind of arenas that trees are important for carbon sequestration, cooling in urban areas, reducing energy costs, improving mental health, other benefits. But we're seeing a lot about the increasing urban canopy, and I think it's important to also consider managing our existing canopy. Just echoing what Amy and Andrew have already said, in order to support a strong urban canopy, we need to be using data. Data-driven urban forest management helps to plan, maintain, and monitor the health of our urban forest. We can also see our diversity and explore where and how to expand upon it. With data, we can find areas with high heat and low heat mitigation, as well as underserved communities, and focus on these areas. We can also use data to understand what's working and what's not working and make adjustments based on the information that we already have. Policy, I think policy is really important. Policy is crucial as it relates to developing and managing urban forests. Policy can involve incentives to plant more trees, mitigation for removing large trees, tree protection requirements, and a lot more to support and grow our canopy. And lastly, I think it's important to be aware of local nonprofits and planting initiatives and support those in any way we can. These groups spend a lot of time on the ground getting to know individuals, and so they can report back to us on what they're seeing on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. All right, Cecilia. All right, last call for Cecilia. All right, Kate, you're on deck. Let's hear from our planning department.
Hi, this is Cecilia.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Cecilia.
Hi, I'm Cecilia Rosacker. I'm the director of the Rio Grande Agricultural Land Trust. We are a nonprofit that protects land and water for people and wildlife in central New Mexico. We accomplish our work through conservation easements, which are deed restrictions that run with the land forever and protects the conservation values of the land. The work that we do really hits on all of the top 5 strategies that you have listed there. Protecting farmland, we protect farmland and natural habitat, ensuring that there's green spaces. A lot of our work is protecting natural habitat, Rio Grande natural habitat and wetlands. More than half of our conservation easements protect that riparian habitat. Protecting these lands also speaks to keeping impermeable surfaces available. We work with landowners forever and work with them to adopt soil and land managed practices. And so the work by protecting the farmland and the natural habitat, our goal is also to densify communities and keep those open spaces for the community to have access to. This benefits everyone because we protect the local food shed, creates business opportunities for agrarian communities, wildlife corridors, ensures species biodiversity, recreational opportunities for the public, and a connection to nature with these open spaces and scenic vistas. And we partner with lots of agencies, and I think there's a real strong coalition of people focused on protecting this and the farmland and the natural habitat in the Middle Rio Grande. And I think one of the biggest challenges we face is really educating the community about the importance of and the connection between the urban and rural communities, and how things that happen in the urban community impact rural communities. For example, like in Socorro, when development happens in the northern part of the state, the water gets transferred from our Socorro farms, and there's a buy and dry, and that impacts everybody. The wildlife corridors, it impacts the wetlands. So keeping flood irrigated agriculture going and having people understand that connection between flood irrigated agriculture and the river and the riparian habitat and how it's all connected. Those are some of the challenges I see, because sometimes ag gets a bad rap and flood irrigated agriculture gets a bad rap. And so those are places I see opportunities to educate the public about the connectivity between all of us in urban and rural communities.
Very well said, Cecilia. I think, yeah, I think that is a really important theme to pull into this because, yeah, everything is connected. Thank you so much for your comments. In the interest of time, we're going to pass it over to Kate.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Clark. I'm with the city's planning department. I work in regulatory planning, primarily with the zoning ordinance. So when we talk about land use and sustainability, I think it's important to keep in mind that urban planning generally happens at two levels. So we have policy plans, like the comprehensive plan, so that establishes a vision for the future. And then we also have regulations like the zoning ordinance or the IDO. So that really makes those policy visions happen through legal regulation. A big part of the city's policy approach to planning is through centers and corridors. So the idea is to focus growth in key areas such as centers. So those are hubs that have mixed use activity, and then also in corridors, which run along major transit routes. So this approach tries to use existing infrastructure to support walkable and connected areas, then while also preserving rural areas and more established neighborhoods. The zoning ordinance puts this into action by allowing more density in centers and corridors. So this is done in a variety of means, but it could include mixed-use zoning, allowing for taller buildings, permitting a wider variety of housing types, and then also providing incentives for projects near jobs and transit. And this does matter for sustainability because when people can live closer to their work or their daily needs, we really cut down on driving, reduce emissions, we make better use of resources. And then ultimately, it does give people more choices in where they live and how they live. So our advice would be to really keep supporting density and mixed-use zoning where it makes sense. By doing this in the regulatory sense, it's really one of the most powerful tools that we have to implement this at the planning level.
Thank you so much, Kate. Okay, Mari, you're up next.
Hi everyone, Mari Sambanya, Bernalillo County Open Space. I was about to say planning. I spent many years in planning and I loved it too. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. Everyone said some great things. I jotted down some points as well. So I would say that our work is about stewarding, educating, and access. So in that context, contributing to a landscape of natural, cultural, and historic resources, reconnecting people to each other by connecting people to their backyards, and helping people to be the stewards and nurturers of the land and water and resources that come with that. Monitoring, managing, and revitalizing these resources, and collaborating and partnering with community organizations and other agencies. I think I feel really privileged that as an institution, we have these resources to care for the benefit of our entire community. And, that's limited, right? I mean, we facilitate, we coordinate, we manage funds as well. Those are all important things, but really we can't do that without being connected with our neighbors, with community organizations, with these different entities on the ground that are directly serving the people that we say we need to serve, right? So I think that's very important. But I think especially working in a better, or I'm seeking to work in a more intelligent way with other agencies too, across zoning, across natural resource regulations, across all of these different policies, and matching those with needs of people on the ground. And I think that's what we all do, and it's very challenging. But I think that we can work better together in one of these. This is such a conversation. I think that can bring us there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mari. All right, last but certainly not least, Sarah.
Thanks, Alice, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to the audience today. My name is Sarah Hurteau, and I am the Climate Resilient Cities Program Director at a nonprofit called Signal. I'm trained as a wildlife biologist, and I've been working in conservation for a little over 20 years. in a lot of different ways, both urban and rural. And I think our natural resources are under a lot of stress. Our urban communities put a lot of stress on our natural resources, and I worry a little bit about how we are now pinning much of our hopes and dreams on carbon sequestration on our natural and working lands, particularly in the desert Southwest. So there was a study that was done by the Nature Conservancy in New Mexico that estimated the climate change mitigation potential of natural and working lands that was funded by the U.S. Climate Alliance through American Forests that came out a few years ago. And the punchline is that our systems are not productive enough to offset any of the emissions that we're generating. And so really what that means is that we need to focus our efforts of preservation, of restoration and protection on these natural and working lands for other reasons other than carbon. I'm a strong advocate for the protection of all of those different kinds of ecosystems, including our urban green infrastructure. And I think that there are many reasons to protect those landscapes, but carbon isn't the primary one. So I just want to make sure that we're not putting additional pressures on those lands. I think there are lots of opportunities, and I agree with what many of the other panelists said today. I want to highlight programs like the Tree Stewards Program from Tree New Mexico and the Backyard Refuge Program, the Arid LID Coalition, and many others that are really helping municipalities, both urban and rural, and our residents with educational materials and helping them understand how we can use our influence and our work in the natural landscape to better design urban landscapes and integrate nature into these designed landscapes, and use those efforts, including green stormwater infrastructure, as a strategy for climate adaptation. So I really, there's so much work that needs to happen in emission reductions, but our natural and working lands really need our focus to be on adaptation, both to help us adapt to climate change and be able to continue to have sort of the outdoor lifestyle that we love here in New Mexico, but also so that we can help adapt our landscapes to the coming and already here heat and changing precipitation patterns. I've been working with Andrew for many years on trying to figure out how to talk to nurseries to provide the plants that we need for future climate adaptation. So thanks, Andrew, for bringing all of that work up. So Alice, I'll turn it back to you. We made it. 20 seconds left.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Dan, for adding a little time today. Let's move on to the next section. And this is where we do our next vote. So this is, so we'll move on to the next slide. And we'll do our second vote. So this is the results of this are going to be those top kind of big bucket strategies that we'll be focusing our time and attention on in this regional plan. And then we'll be working with together to ideate specific examples and specific ideas that you'd like to see under each of those buckets. So yeah, we'll give folks a few seconds here. Please note that you can also stack your responses. So if you feel really strongly about one, you can put all 5 of your votes in one, or you can spread them across a variety. For those of you who maybe have just joined us, the poll link is in the chat. So you can connect there real quick. And we're gonna move on here soon. So please submit your votes. If you haven't already, we're gonna do a 5-second countdown. And then we're gonna take quick note of what those top strategies are. So in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so it looks like we have expand urban forests, as number 1. We have preserve wetlands for number 2. And we have number 3 as reduce impermeable surfaces, and then densify communities is 4. And then 5, we've got a decrease single-use zoning. All right, so we'll take note of that and we'll go on to the first question here. So this is the section where we're going to ask your guys' ideas. So for the first one, which was expanding urban forests, what are some specific examples that you'd like to see? What are some policies or levers you'd like to maybe for us to consider? Are there funding opportunities or workforce gaps? So any ideas you guys have to help us make this a reality, this is that section. So Katrina, do you want to take it away?
Yes, let's go. Oops. Okay. So again, this strategy is the expand tree coverage and/or green spaces, and I think Dan will put the list of strategies. Yeah, he has the list of strategies in the chat. And what we want to, or the first one, and what we want to hear from you is just any ideas on the policy levers, implementation actions, funding opportunities, workforce needs, anything we should be considering related to this strategy. And I know we had a great discussion earlier that already gave us a lot of food for thoughts, I feel like, for these different strategies. But yeah, anything you feel should be considered, could help implement this, could be a great strategy to support it, implementation actions, farm worker training programs, integrate green stormwater infrastructure with urban forestry expansion, native plant rebate expansion. That sounds awesome. Decreasing heat island effect, increasing green spaces, increasing water filtration, water energy stipends for communities who manage their own trees, utilizing native plants. Those are awesome strategies. So we'll give a few more seconds. Again, if you're typing your response and you submit it, it will be in here, even if it doesn't scroll on the screen. We'll go to the second one, which was increase thermal biomass conversion. Is that right, Dan? Let me see.
It's in the chat.
Preserve, sorry, yes. So second one is expand or preserve or expand grasslands, forests, and wetlands. So let's go to that one. Great, and there's still strategies or ideas coming in. We really appreciate that. Next one. So what are the key considerations for implementation for the preserve or expand grasslands, forests, and wetlands? And these are somewhat related. One focuses a little more on the urban environment. The other one focuses a little more on the rural spaces. Reduce sprawl. Call your senators to save public lands. Yes, we should all do that. Restrict development on natural lands. Expand wetlands. Cluster development in rural spaces. And those examples from Colorado provided some great ideas on how they think about their rural areas, city development boundaries, that areas beyond a certain point are preserved. Yeah, growth boundaries. Those are great. Private lands conservation policy. Governments commit to preserve their existing grasslands, forests, and wetlands. Eliminate solar development on natural lands. Tree and brush management to help preserve fire breakouts. Yeah, I think there's a lot of fuel management that needs to happen in some areas, but I don't think they have to be in conflict with this strategy. Any other thoughts or ideas? Put them in now and we'll go to our next strategy in a second. Again, anything you type in will be recorded and we will have those later when we go and noodle through all the responses. All right, next one is reduce impermeable surfaces. So we all have a lot of pavement that really contributes to the heat island effect, and reducing some of the paved areas meets different criterias by helping reduce the heat island effect, but also increase the water infiltration, and then obviously allow more area to grow things. Need to consider the cost of using permeable surfaces. That's a good one. City buying abandoned lots and creating permeable natural spaces, get rid of big empty shopping centers, more GSI. Ordinance limiting development, permeable paving, paint black asphalt to lighten, and they did that in California, I think. Flexible around parking lot material, flexibility. That's a good one. Create parking maximums for all new residential developments. And the city is actually working on some IDO updates to expand their parking maximums. More trees around bus stops, yes. Remove minimum parking requirements. Lots of parking comments here. All right, a few more seconds to add your responses, and then we'll move on to number 4, densify communities. All right, we'll move on. Next one, densify communities. Again, what are key considerations for implementations? Any ideas you have for densifying communities? Again, that's kind of growing inward and upward rather than outward. TOD and more frequent bus routes, create parking maximums for all new residential developments. And that's definitely, parking makes development more expensive and also takes up more land area. So reducing that allows for more affordable housing options, and also conserve some land for other uses. Not applicable to rural communities, that's true. Provides missing middle housing options, making sure existing communities are not pushed out. Remove parking minimums. More buses and safer buses, green roofs. I think green roofs are difficult in New Mexico. I know UNM had one under Bill Fleming a long time ago. I would love to see those. They're just because it gets so hot, but I'm sure with the right plans we could figure that out. Okay, let's go to the next one. Last one, and that one was decrease single-use zoning, and that basically means that instead of having segregated zoning areas, will allow a greater mix of uses that also reduces the need to drive. If we have commercial uses in neighborhoods mixed in, we can eliminate some of the traveling we are doing. It also allows for more walkability, and creates a better mix of everybody in one area. So the barriers here are financing, not zoning. That's a good point. Amend statute to allow 2 or more units on every property by right. Rezone to allow 3 or more residential units. Increase mixed-use areas. Goal of having percentage of neighborhood to be retail. I would love that. A little coffee shop on the corner or a little corner store. Rezone entire uses. And there's also, there have been the accessory commercial units was a trend for a while, but it hasn't been implemented in a lot of areas, which is a great idea to bring back some of these neighborhood serving smaller retail uses to neighborhoods, so everything becomes like a little community where you can serve yourself without having to drive far. Be cautious of negative unintended consequences of mixed-use zoning. Who benefits? That's a good consideration. Incentivize walkability, promote adaptive reuse. That's a good one. There's a lot of examples of office buildings being adapted to multifamily. All right. I think these are amazing additions. We are really excited to get all of your input here. So we'll move on to our catch-all bucket. What other strategies do you think we should include in this plan and why? So is there anything we have been missing either on that list of strategies that we had presented, or any other thoughts you like to share? Now's the time. Oh, and we are already a tiny bit over. So we'll make this really quick. So any other thoughts you have, please put them in here. We'll give you 20 seconds so we can throw these in here. The next part of this meeting will be the workforce. So we will be taking the top 5 strategies that we all selected and go over those with the task force to see what some of the implications in terms of environmental injustices are. So if you want to stick around, we would love to have you. So it will be another hour. All right. Thank you for all the additional thoughts. Consider water resources, collaboration with purpose. That's a really good one. Incentives. People won't care otherwise. Yes, true. All right. We'll jump to the next slide. You can still put your thoughts in here. All right. And Alice, I don't know, do you want to cover this slide?
Yeah, sure. So this is our last of our sector meetings, but we do have our last workshop in 2 weeks' time, which is called Cross-Cutting Strategies. So this is all about things that kind of touch all of these different greenhouse gas sectors. So workforce, education, funding, those things that we need to be considering when we're thinking about actually implementing all of this, all these great ideas. So that will be a really interesting session. Again, July 2nd. So we're going to be welcoming anyone who's engaged with us from the beginning of this workshop series to participate and learn and collaborate on some of those items. And we are still in the process of figuring out what our community report back will be, but we do hope to have some time to synthesize and start drafting and writing up this plan, and then bring it back to the public for additional comment. So that's kind of our process going forward. We will be moving on to the community task force meeting in this second session. We're really focused on highlighting and amplifying their voices, but folks are welcome to listen in and kind of engage in the chat if that makes sense. But it is our chance to really hear from our amazing community task force on more of the equity components of this work, and to make sure that it's really prioritizing community values. So thank you everyone for your time today. I think we're going to move on, take a 1-minute break, and we'll move on to our community task force meeting here soon. So maybe when the timer goes off. So we'll go in one. Oh, okay. Well, I guess we'll start in 2 minutes. This is our community newsletter for those of you who are interested in staying connected with our work. This is where we're promoting all of the things that we've been doing, as well as reporting back on all of these meetings. So that's where we add the notes. That's where we link the recordings. It's also on our website on that Get Involved page. But this is a great tool. This newsletter is a great tool to invite other people into the fold if you think their voices are important to be included in this space. So thank you, everyone. With that, we'll meet back here with our community task force members in 1 minute and 33 seconds. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for hanging in there and joining us for this second hour. As we have done with the previous meetings, we'll cover a few slides and then we'll unshare the presentation for introductions so that we can recognize everybody in the room. And then we will be diving into the strategies that we shared earlier and identify equity touch points. And then we'll talk about next steps. So I'll jump right in to the introduction and I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so we can see everybody's faces. All right, and I kind of marked who I've seen in the room, so I will just call on everybody that I found on the list. If I'm missing somebody, please let me know. So I'm gonna try to do it alphabetically. I hope everybody has settled back in. I know this was a really quick break. All right, I'll start at the beginning. Alejandria. And just again, like your name, your affiliation, there's again quite a few people on that don't know you yet. And so just introduce yourself. So Alejandria, take it away.
Thank you, Katrina. Alejandria Lyons. I am the coalition coordinator for New Mexico No Fault Solutions, task force member, also a member of the Justice 40 Oversight Committee. We are working with a couple different environmental and climate justice organizations across the state to do education and policy around greenwash false solutions. I'm also from Los Lunas, and so as well as Peralta, so come from some of the Sequias and land grants. So I'll pass it back to you, Katrina. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much. Let's go to Cassandra.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy. I'm a PhD student here at the University of New Mexico. I do all my research more south at the Savieta National Wildlife Refuge and long-term ecological research site. I spend my days thinking about drought and how we can have more resilient ecosystems in our native lands here in New Mexico. And I am from northern New Mexico originally, and so it's been fun moving down south and learning about issues here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cassie. Danielle.
Hi, everybody. I'm Danielle Garcia. I'm based out of Valencia County, Los Lunas, Bosque Farms area. I come from the private industry of renewable energy, doing community outreach. I've worked in climate justice and have now expanded into another organization as an industry engagement manager. So I work for both on translating the industry side to nonprofit language, and I just started that this week. So also a new job in the fold of doing the work here too.
Awesome. Congratulations on your new job. Let's go to Gina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gina Brania. I am the president of the Delamar Neighborhood Association, which is in the North Valley. And I'm also the education coordinator for the Center for Social Sustainable Systems. Good to see everyone again.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. Gina, let's go to Krista.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Krista Chico. I come from the tribes of Muskogee, Navajo, and Acoma. I work here in Albuquerque for the Native Professional Advancement Center, and I'm a job developer with them. Really working with our Native population 18 and over just to help provide more resources. But aside from that, I also work within the community to help bring up more engagement and collaboration among different entities, including like the different pueblos and different Native organizations throughout the city. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Krista. And Neil.
Hi, everyone. Neil Pino. I'm a communications coordinator with Nature Niños, nonprofit here in Albuquerque, and I'm a student researcher at CNM studying environmental and climate change impacts here in Albuquerque. As someone who loves science and loves technology, I also love the earth, and I realized that our lack of balance in between the both is what's causing the overuse of our resources. So here to learn and here to give information to anyone who needs it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. And I think last but not least, Tanya, take it away.
Hi, my name's Tanya Mullen. I'm with the New Mexico Circular Sanitation Project. I live in the International District where I grow food and plant trees, and I also grow food in Bosque Farms area.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Did I forget anybody?
I think Jorge just entered,
Oh,
so
okay.
maybe we can.
Cool. Let me see. Jorge. Yes. Hey, Jorge, we are just here. You have great timing because we are introducing ourselves. If you could just introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your affiliation.
Muy bien. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jorge Garcia. I'm over here in the South Valley in Atrisco. I'm with CESOS. I'm the director of the Center for Social Sustainable Systems. I'm also the secretary of the South Valley Regional Association of Acequias.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jorge. Anybody else I left out? Alice, did you see anybody else?
I think we're good. The only,
Okay.
I just like a quick call out. I know Yvette Travar is here. She's one of the mayor's field reps that focuses on. Oh wait, maybe she popped out. She was here for a second.
No, she's still here.
Okay, great. And then we also have someone from the city council policy rep. I think Matt Cox is also with us today. And we also have our new, our department, our media point of contact. We just hired on. Jeremy is also with us today. So just want to welcome them all.
Awesome. Thank you for highlighting them. I'll share my screen again, and we've done this now a couple of times, so I feel like we are very good at this now. We'll jump into a few. Oh, this is the whole list of everyone. So again, thank you to the task force for being here. I think your input really helps us ground this and identify where the benefits fall short. And first question, Dan, if you could put the link again in the chat, anyone that still needs it, we have the link. And then if you want to do it on your phone, the QR code. Again, we'll do that so we can capture everybody's input, but we also do this to enter into a conversation so that you can provide us a little bit more input on what your thoughts are. So what's one thing you appreciated or found valuable in the first half of the meeting? Anything you feel like was really interesting, provided value to you? I thought there was a lot of amazing content, the emphasis on protecting and expanding green spaces and tree canopy. Very much agree with that. I think, especially now that it's so hot, the trees provide so many benefits. I enjoyed hearing from ranchers, farmers, urban foresters, and more. It was valuable to hear from the different perspective, increase green canopy using native and climate resilient plants, the emphasis on utilizing native plants. And I know, Neil, you were asking about a list of native trees, and I think there were a couple of links in the chat, but we'll make sure that those were the right lists. I know there is lists that are that have trees that are appropriate or that the city has identified as appropriate. Amy's note on the beneficial role livestock can play. The emphasis is on protecting land tenure, but the comment that agriculture gets a bad rep as well as flood irrigation are also made. Nice to see common interests and that people are concerned about similar things. Urban forestry, climate resilience. Yes, yes, and yes. I'll advance to the next couple of slides. I appreciate all those great thoughts. our agenda again. I think we can skip over this. So we'll jump into the meeting goals. So again, uplifting community values and priorities. This hour is really for you to help us tie the strategies back to what you feel is appropriate and could benefit frontline communities, and then prepare for the next workshop. So yeah, project update, equity touchpoint. So what feedback do you have on the sector strategies discussed and selected during the workshop? So any overarching feedback before we jump into the 5 strategies? Yeah, so any other feedback? And we can also jump into the next questions. I know you already gave a lot of feedback, so let's move on. All right, so, and again, we do this as we did in the last couple meetings. Dan just posted our strategies that bubbled to the top during our second vote. So the first one here is expand urban tree coverage and or green spaces. And again, we want to select 1 through 5, 1 or makes injustice worse, 5 addresses root cause, and I still have an issue with the word exacerbates. And as we did in the previous meetings, I would love to hear from all of you why you choose some, why you make these selections. So who selected 1? So basically increases injustice. If who selected that would like to provide a little more context, that would be awesome. Anybody like to speak to their selection?
So I hit that, but I actually meant to hit number 4. So you can
Okay.
disregard that. Sorry.
Okay. Do you wanna talk a little bit about why you selected 4?
Well, as it regards or impacts environmental justice, right? I think one of the things that we kind of suffer from being in the West is we've gotten very acclimated to things being very spread out, right? But being very spread out is a bit of a privilege at this point, and it makes many things not accessible for a variety of people, and a lot of times for underserved communities. So the idea of densifying communities is a little bit of a tricky dance, because I believe that infill conversation earlier was really valuable, and how planning codes are modified directly affects the ability to do that. But the reason I say I think it's a tricky dance is that it doesn't mean, we think of, like, if you think about what happened like in the 60s and 70s in big urban spaces, Chicago, New York, right, where big slum tenement buildings were built, right? That you could say that was like densifying communities, but it wasn't necessarily helpful or healthy.
Yvette,
Right.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I think we're voting on expanding urban tree coverage and or green space. So great comments, but
Sorry.
let's maybe
Well,
we
no,
can
we were.
bucket them.
She asked me about why I picked 4. So sorry, I was just going by what she asked me. Okay.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. So we're voting from so strategy 1, which is the expand urban tree coverage and or green spaces, from a scale of 1 to 5. How much does it address environmental injustice? So for expanding urban tree coverage, we're basically rating it on a scale. So how much does it address environmental injustice? So 5 is like it's doing a good job for communities, it's righting the wrongs, and 1 is it's not so good for EJ. And we will get to the fourth strategy and our fourth question down the road.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you, Alice, for clarifying that. And Yvette, we'll remember your comment when we get to that. Does anybody from the task force would like to explain their choice of selection? So was there anybody that selected 3 that would like to speak to that a little more? Anybody? Oh,
I did not pick 3. I picked 5.
Okay.
When I saw that it ended up as the #1 strategy, it made me really happy. I'd love to hear other people's insights on it. But I really believe that that should be like our #1 priority is, increasing urban coverage. It's super hot. It's gonna be like our #1 deterrent against the heat. It's gonna be our #1 help with carbon or greenhouse gases. I'm not too sure exactly on how water management is for that. I saw someone brought that up in the comments, so that is definitely one thing I'm ignorant towards, and I would love to hear other people's kind of insights towards that. But during my research, I've had someone tell me that in Albuquerque in the last, I think, 20 or 30 years, we've lost over 60% of our urban canopy coverage. Um, so it's a huge loss, and I think it's like kind of low-hanging fruit, things that we should focus on. As I walk around Albuquerque, in the South Valley, up here in the Heights, in the war zone or the International District, I don't really see many places where this is like an actual feasible option. Like, I saw some people talking about ripping up parking lots and putting in green spaces, which I think is, like a really cool idea, but um, definitely something I would love to learn more about. And if anyone had any comments on that, I'd love to hear it.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Neil. Does anybody want to add their thoughts or respond to that? Anybody else?
I also ranked this highly, and I thought about the imbalance, the racial injustice that we see on where plants are planted and maintained. And so I think this is one of those strategies where we can really focus our planting and our management on areas that are underserved. And not only does it help out with cooling effect, but it also increases biodiversity. It, attracts more bugs. There's some ecosystem benefits that we get with expanding that coverage and making our landscape less patchy and more interconnected. And so I do really like this strategy. I rated it a 4 because there is that tension, right, with trying to find the right plants. What are we planning for a hotter, drier future? Are we putting into the budget the maintenance and thinking about it more holistically? But again, I guess that we should think about this. This feels very urban, and when we have our other one, thinking about what this means in the rural context is important too.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Cassie. Anybody else? Any additional thoughts?
I was gonna say I ranked it a 4 as well for similar reasons to kind of what Cassie was saying. I think it would be really beneficial to revitalize some of those parks and green spaces that are suffering currently and just refresh those to start. But also, like she's mentioned, like finding the right kind of plants. I know it's been mentioned in a previous meeting before, but like utilizing plants that you can grow fruits and vegetables on that people are able to use in the community. I think that would be something to look into as well. But same thing, I think that we do have a lot of these spaces, and so I would love to know more about how, like Neil had mentioned about like the water management side of it, because I do see that could be a hindrance. So that's why I ranked it.
Thank you, Krista. And Alejandria, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I also ranked a 4 when I was interning with Partners for Fish and Wildlife. There's already some projects that I just wanted to note that we should look into, like some of those that the MRGCD is doing to try to revitalize, also with the city open space and the county open space. to revitalize like the burn scars. You know, I know we're thinking about like infilling as well in the city, but I also think like, I don't know if this also talks about like the bosque and continuing to keep the river, you know, putting plants near there that have been burned. So I just wanted to add that case study because I know that there was some folks that were trying to do some healing garden kind of stuff, but also the tree cover for the bosque is also, I think, just important. I don't know if this really addresses that, or this is more talking about like the city infill of like those heat islands, but kind of a question, but also a comment about some case study stuff.
Well, thank you. Thank you for those thoughts. I think we can.
Well, can I just say one thing?
Oh,
Sorry.
yes. Yeah.
And
go
that is,
ahead.
I've wondered about the practicality of the urban tree coverage because of the watering part, and if the city has looked into creating more like human designs for shade and corridors. And I've just kind of think that could be a potential option too, especially along walking paths. If there could be some kind of shade structure that's designed where we could have vines that grow maybe within it, because vines are a little bit easier on water oftentimes, or if there's just a human made creation for shade so that there doesn't need to be that water maintenance. Just a thought.
Thank you, Gina. And that's definitely, I think, something that needs to be considered, that relation between growing things and water resources. And that came up earlier as well. Anybody else wants to add? Oh, yes.
Katrina,
Yeah.
Sarah has offered to share her thoughts if people want to hear on this topic, and she's sharing her stuff in the chat as well.
Okay, Sarah, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah, I just didn't know if we had time for me to chime in. So, yeah, lots of really good questions here. I love where this is heading. A couple of things that I'll just highlight. One is that I did a urban heat island analysis a number of years ago, and it identified living ground cover as another way to mitigate heat, and offer cooling effects while still keeping the idea of balancing our water needs with that. I think the Climate Ready Trees project and the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority's plant list for their Xeriscape program also offers lots of options that are very low water use plants. So we are, as a community, those of us that are working on what plants should be planted and when and where, are taking all of these things into consideration. And so I hope that information is more available to you all to be able to put into practice in your own spaces. The last thing that I'll just say is that putting trees in places like parking lots is really harmful to the trees. I know it's great for us to park our cars under and to have that shade, but I agree with, I'm not sure who it was that said, human scaled other shade structures. I call them non-tree shade strategies. And I think those are really important to include in something like this so that we can use those shade structures in places where we don't have the soil volume or the overhead space for a mature tree. So those are also some options.
Thank you so much. Any other comments from the task force? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question or strategy. All right, so the next one is preserve or expand grasslands, forests, and wetlands. So again, we have the scale where you 1 through 5, whether they are addressing environmental injustice. 1 is they make them worse, 5 is they address the root cause. So yeah, make your selections, and I would very much appreciate to hear your thoughts behind your selections. I think they really help give us a little bit of context. So anyone of the task force that selected 3, do you want to share, or 4 or 5? Do you want to share with us your thoughts? Anyone want to share their thoughts? Again, we are looking at expanding grasslands, open spaces, and wetlands, and that's kind of the counterpart to the last strategy where we talked about urban landscapes. Now we are talking about the larger expanses of landscapes in the more rural areas. Does anybody want to provide some input, thoughts, context to this?
I can share a little of what I was thinking. I marked a 4. So when I read this strategy, I really focus on the word preserve rather than expand. And I think preservation is one of our really easy, I guess I shouldn't say easy. It's more tangible than and more realistic than expanding, right? Because I think expanding, you have to plan that out, and that seems a little bit more confusing for my brain, but preservation of what we already have. We have these existing landscapes that are doing so much for our ecosystem without us interfering in them. And I think that can be really helpful. And I think also in the preservation, I ranked it as a 4 with injustice and equity, thinking about how when we preserve lands, maintaining cultural relevance with that. So there are some preservation practices that push people away and you lose contact with that land. And we definitely want to move forward in a plan that includes humans as part of that preservation and ecosystem. So thinking about it in a different way.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Anybody else?
I can go
Any-
next. I also marked number 4 because I do think that, yes, we need to preserve what we have, but we also have to look at what we have lost. There's a lot of ecosystems that are needed for different birds and different part of the ecosystem that don't exist anymore. All they should be expanded and preserved. So that's why, to me, both preserving and expanding and what we need is that's the reason why I put a 4.
Awesome, thank you, Jorge.
Mhm.
Any other thoughts related to this? Anyone else wants to share their selection context? Hearing none.
I want to flag that what Cecilia wrote in the chat. And that it's important to note that flood irrigated agriculture makes up 62% of the wetlands in the West.
Wow.
And Alejandra also mentioned that Sanchez Farms is a good example of this, which I assume is the human-centric cultural, of human-centric conservation is what I think that's referring to. And Alejandra, let me know if I got that wrong. Great.
She says yes. Cool. Thank you, Alice. And anyone who likes to, any other comments, just unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was going to say, I had voted a 4 on this one as well. I think it's really important to, like it's been mentioned, to preserve, just because there are a lot of like Native and Indigenous cultures out there as well. And we want to make sure that we're continuing to let them live their livelihoods and contribute to our community, and continue to thrive out there. And right now that's in jeopardy with a lot of things that are going on in the world. And I know, for example, there's like Mount Taylor is a very important site, and wanting to disrupt that forest land is something that's really critical right now. So that's why I think it's something that's highly important.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Murray also posted Sanchez Farm open space as a storm drainage feature, and I agree, an example of multi-use to benefit communities. Any other thoughts? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next one, which is reduce impermeable surfaces. All right, we'll go over there. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. One is making it worse. 5 is addressing the root cause. And again, here we are looking at decreasing the amount of space we have that is paved. Again, any thoughts on your selection? Just unmute yourself and share. I don't see people's faces today, so I can't catch you before. It looks like, Tanya, you're unmuted, maybe?
Yeah, I did unmute. This is Tanya. So I live in the International District, and as most people know, this portion of the city has some of the highest concentrations of multi-family housing, and it's just covered in impermeable surfaces, which is of course bad for our tree canopies, bad for the heat island. And so I feel like this is a really important thing. But not just as it impacts the city, you know, the more water that washes down away from the center of the city and into the river impacts people downstream and causes pollution problems and financial problems for the city when they're fined for it. So
Yes, great comment. Tanya, thank you. Any other thoughts? Anyone? Unmute yourself. Anyone selected 3 from the task force and want to provide some context? Or 4
I
or 5?
selected
Oh,
3.
go ahead. Yeah.
My thoughts with selecting 3, I really love the idea of reducing permeable surfaces. So all the concrete, all the pavement that really absorb that heat, which contributes a lot to greenhouse gases and urban heat island effect. But I also wanted to just think about when we remove some of those impermeable surfaces, how that impacts other users. So, if we are reducing concrete sidewalks, for example, how does that impact walkers, pedestrians, wheelchair users? So thinking about it, I guess, like how that actually plays out, what we mean when we dig into reducing permeable surfaces.
That's a great thought, Cassie. And I think like all surfaces could be made ADA compliant so that we can still walk on them, but for sidewalks, definitely it might be the concrete surfaces might be preferred. Any other thoughts?
I also wanted to add in, I also ranked it a 3 just because I think when we think of solutions like this, they're great ideally, but when you like thinking about the amount of energy, the amount of water that takes into removing these sidewalks and then reinstalling like a newer source of, it seems like counterintuitive to kind of what we're trying to do. Like we're replacing something to reduce greenhouse gases, but then the process itself probably creates more greenhouse gases than if we had just left it in itself. I also did want to second the ADA ideology about it because, we have to think about our community needs. And
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. And Sarah just posted that stormwater is the #1 pollution source to the river and permeable surfaces are one type of green stormwater infrastructure.
Can I
Any-
just add really quick
Yes.
that and green stormwater infrastructure is a way to keep the water sort of high in the watershed and use it to be available for plants and other trees, to increase green space and mitigate heat island effects and all the things that you all are just mentioning. I think the other thing is thanks for bringing up the idea of removing sidewalks and what that does for accessibility. I think, there are many products that are permeable that maintain the ADA accessibility. So certainly no one is advocating for reducing accessibility that I've heard of. So the other thing is like replacing parking lot materials. Those things often get replaced frequently. And so when they do come up for replacement, then that's when it makes sense to replace, when the replacement's going to happen anyways, that then we replace them with something that's more permeable.
Awesome, thank you. Any other thoughts on strategy 3, reducing impermeable surfaces? Nope. Okay. And there was Cassandra. So GSI is green stormwater infrastructure. So that's basically when we build in stormwater catchments into roadways and parking lots. And there's some of that already in the city, but definitely not enough to capture stormwater on site. All right. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next one, which was densify communities. Thank you, Dan. All right, we'll move on to the next one. Again, same idea, same procedure. We have 1, basically making it worse, 5, addressing root cause, and anyone feel free to unmute to talk about your thoughts, where you're coming from on your selection. It looks like we have a lot of number 3s, so it would be great to hear some of that. Anyone like to get started? Any thoughts on this idea, densifying communities, infill development, higher density housing? We heard a little bit earlier on that might not always be the right idea. It has to be done right, so we don't create conditions people don't want to or should not be living in.
I
Does
just wanted
anyone-
to highlight that something that was brought up in our first climate strategy workshop with Kendra Montanari from the Mr. Cog. This is something that she mentioned that when at a regional context, this is one of the biggest, the most impactful strategies for reducing emissions. And I think it's especially true in this regional context because when we have people, when we provide people the ability to live closer to their work or to the places that they need to go to procure resources, like food, that sort of stuff, we're reducing a lot of those transportation costs and emissions. And so I think that's really important, but I think some of those themes were picked up on in the transportation and buildings sector workshops around how do we do that equitably and how do we make sure that people can be financially stable and have maybe home ownership opportunities or not be overburdened by energy. So I just wanted a quick flag call back to to that early meeting a few months ago.
Thank you, Alice, for jogging our memories. And Tanya, it looks like you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I was just going to highlight the need for thoughtful dense development, like was mentioned earlier. Things like co-housing projects or land trusts like Sawmill, where people have engaging opportunities to build communities, not just, high-rise apartment complexes where we're all in our own silos, but really getting back to that neighborhood community model, I think is important.
That's a great comment. Thank you so much, Tanya. Anyone else? I think this one is also, I think, important to consider that anything we build out creates maintenance costs for the city long term, and it's really hard for communities to stay on top of that. So as we densify, we can have more resources to the denser communities closer by. But does anybody else want to explain their selection of 3, maybe? Right in the middle. Anyone?
I marked it as a 3 just because I do think, as Tanya said and others, thoughtful densification makes sense in an urban context, but I think in our rural areas and our farmlands, right, like it doesn't work for everybody. And so I marked it as just straight in the middle, good for some. We'd have to think creatively of what it meant in spaces that are not in the city.
Awesome. Thank you, Cassie. Anyone else? Otherwise, we can, and Tanya also added co-housing Albuquerque and Casa Shalom are interesting models. Anyone else? Otherwise, we'll move to the next and last question or strategy, which was decrease single-use zoning. And again, that's kind of along the lines of creating a more diverse mix of uses in neighborhoods. So we reduce the need to leave your neighborhood and to have everything closer by. There was this idea floated for a while. There was a 15-minute city started in Paris, which works really well, I guess, in big cities with a lot of density already. I don't think that's that applicable here, but I think we can start like allowing some of these like commercial uses maybe back to our communities to have some of those services closer by. But I want to hear from all of you. It looks like we have an overwhelming amount selecting 4. Anyone want to talk to that specific selection? So 4 is close to addressing root causes. Nope. Now we have some 3s, some 5s. Anyone?
I can speak to what I chose for. I think we have to forget that rural communities before also had centralized meeting places. Old towns like Raton and a few others did have a central meeting point, and then everything else was rural, was outstretched. That's also kind of gone away with a lot of urban sprawl. So decreasing urban sprawl, especially in developing rural areas too, I think is highly important. And we just don't have as much mixed land use out in rural areas. One, because they didn't really need them, but also because they were just rapidly growing so fast that we couldn't keep up old standards of how we kept that congestion to a minimum.
Awesome. Thank you, Danielle. Anyone else? Tanya, you posted more mixed use, better for people without cars, encourage more bike foot traffic, better community life. Anyone that selected 3? I'm always calling it the people selecting 3 because that's an interesting one, I feel like. Anyone? Neil?
I put 3 just because I think a solution like this might be more applicable towards like the downtown area where you have kind of like that food desert where you just have like one tiny little market and not really many other places to go shopping. But kind of where I live, I'm not too sure. I wouldn't really see the application kind of like where I live. Um, where I live, it's pretty bus friendly. I mean, you could walk where you need to, a bike. So I think those resources are already pretty good. And then I'm not too sure. I mean, Danielle was kind of just speaking about the rural areas, but I wasn't sure exactly how it could affect our more rural communities or if it would be the main priority with them. But yeah, so that's why I was kind of in the middle with it.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah,
And
oh,
Krista.
yeah, I was gonna say on this one, I voted a 5. Just because I do see that there could be a lot of benefits with that. For example, if we were to like revitalize like some of these apartments that aren't being used anymore, and you could use them for temporary housing for like people who just lost their homes or homeless, just trying to provide housing on top, and then down below you could provide other essential services to help in those situations. You could provide small grocery stores or worksite locations or just job development opportunities and things like that, and give them a opportunity to have a way to kind of get back on their feet. And so I think that's a great benefit. But also other than that too, I think it's important in regards to when we think about a lot of people out there in the community, especially in like a Native community who have their own jobs or who run their own businesses, and being able to run your business out of your home would be a great use. So then that way you're being able to use your space and be able to give back and not have to commute and not have to worry about like those extra expenses and things of that nature.
Awesome. Thank you. That was a great comment. Yes. Let's see. Anybody else wants to provide? Yeah, that was Krista, right? Yeah. Sorry, I just lost my train of thoughts. Anybody else wants to chime in? This one is the last one to provide input on the strategies. Anyone else? Seeing nobody. All right. This was great. Thank you for your input on all of these. Any final comments or questions? So anything else you want to share? Any other considerations? Any thoughts, feedback, anything you would like us to record? Put it in here now. And I know these meetings are long, so, and we already shared a lot and heard a lot from everyone. I'm excited to think through synergies between strategies across the topics. So yes, that will be one of the talking points for our next workshop, to find cross-cutting strategies and see how, I mean, in the end, all or a lot of this is connected. So we are excited about that too. Any other thoughts, questions, last words to leave us with? Otherwise, we are like doing great on time. We need to maintain green spaces in a way that it works for the amount of water we currently have access to. Yes.
And
Already said.
projected to have too. I think that's the
Yes.
other thing. Yeah.
And then already said, but in my opinion, I learned that one, Albuquerque should shift away from planting any non-native vegetation and play a high priority on planting high nutrient density native rainwater vegetation instead. Planning for a future with less water. PCAP spoke about teaching and education agricultural programs for community. Wish it was brought up more. Think about natural buildings and incorporating traditional knowledge into our strategies. Those are all great. thank you so much for those thoughts. If there's anything else, you can still punch it in. And we'll move on to our last slides, a quick outlook. Again, anytime you have any suggestions on the format, improving this meeting, we would love to hear that. We want to make it as good as possible and as valuable to everybody and respect everybody's time. Alice, do we still have office hours? Are they still?
Yeah, so our
On
office
the
hours
books?
are, yeah, they're so they basically fill in. So every week there's an opportunity for the task force to connect with us. But the big one are these sector topics. So next Wednesday at 12:30 to 1:30, I have just an open office hour on the calendar. So folks are welcome to join. If that time doesn't work, also in almost every of my email signatures, there's a little booking link. So you can also pop something on the calendar for some one-on-one time as well.
Awesome. And then we'll share out our meeting summaries again through the newsletter and to you. It always takes us a little bit of time to go through the meeting notes because it's a lot, but we try to get those done. And then we'll share those out. If you have any questions or thought in between, you can always reach out. And then always, if there's anybody else you want us to invite, let us know. We would love to hear that and invite them. And then on next steps, so if you have missed any of the meetings, review those. And then for the cross-cutting strategies, think about funding, workforce need, education. Oh, those include funding, workforce, education, institutional, organizational changes, and others. And then here's our next and last workshop. The format will be a little different. July 2nd, same time, same place on Zoom. And thank you.